Welcome back to the Growing Revenue Through Direct Bookings 7-part video series. I'm Ben Page, and I'm here to walk you through part 2, which is building a search marketing plan grounded in real data. Now, as a reminder, why should we care about direct bookings? It might seem obvious, but direct bookings are better for your brand. They give us full control over that relationship with the customer, and that guest experience from the moment they're researching, dreaming, planning, all the way through to booking and experiencing is critical to how they're going to view and recommend your tour or activity in the future. This is much preferred to handing the reins over to a third party and only owning part of that customer relationship. So today we're going to expand upon what was covered in part 1, and we're going to go through 3 key things. 1, how to better understand consumer behavior generally. I'm going to share a few tools with you that you can use as a starting point for your own research. Number 2, we're going to cover how to map your specific competitive landscape. And I'm talking about your digital marketing landscape. Sometimes that's a little bit differently than who you might name off the top of your head based on the actual physical environment near you. And 3, we're going to cover how to turn your data into insights. So let's start with understanding consumer behavior. I wanted to zoom out and think about this travel customer journey. This is a great framework that was shared by Think with Google several years ago, but I think it's still very relevant today. So if we think about the phases that a guest goes through on their way to discovering your brand, booking something, and then ultimately going on, it starts with dreaming moments. And I would argue that the tools I'm going to share today, they only partially capture that moment of inspiration, right? People use a variety of different sources, including talking to friends and family, thinking on their own or journaling, and then also online research to start to think about what a getaway might look like. From there, we get into the more concrete phase of planning moments. So it's the time to make a plan moment. And this is where channels such as search really start to come into play. Next are let's book it moments. And they're, depending on your market and your activity, there can be a large difference between pre-booking and in-destination booking. Finally, there's what Google calls the can't wait to explore moments. And these are the experiencing moments. It's when they're there, they're actually enjoying and experiencing your activity or your attraction. And this is where the sensory experience comes into play, and they're forming memories and opinions about what this experience is like that will later be used to share when they come back home and they're telling a friend about it or a coworker after their trip. So as I mentioned, people use Google for planning. Oftentimes, this starts with what we call sometimes upper funnel queries, things like things to do in Nashville or best activities in destination. It's a great way to explore options quickly, and search engines are great at surfacing the best answers for a given question. So pre-planners use search engines to explore different options. Like I mentioned, in the 12 weeks leading up to a trip, there are 3 times more experiences searches than hotel searches, and 8 times more experiences searches than air searches. This data from Think with Google helps us to better understand that booking the transportation is a little bit more transactional, but when it comes to planning what the experience will be and mapping it out over time and with the different people that might be along with that guest, that's where search engines come into play. But like I mentioned, in-destination travelers also use search engines to book experiences. And we see this oftentimes when there might be a booking window that happens within 1 day or 2 days. So a user visits your website and they're booking that activity same day or next day. And also that the date they've booked the activity for is often same day or within just a couple of days of the booking. And what's really interesting is that many tour operators have kind of a two-sided strategy they need to account for. One being visibility for the nationwide searcher, someone who might be out of destination and kind of pre-planning. And that's one segment. And there's a second segment of in-destination travelers who might even use things like near me or close by. These kinds of searches have grown significantly over the last few years. This data, like Google suggests that they've grown 6x in the past 2 years. And so as the search results themselves continue to change, we need to keep this in consideration and understand how we might become visible in the normal search results or in the map pack. We can use tools like Google Trends to measure relative demand. We can search by search terms, by interests, and other trends, and Google will show us over time the relative search demand. And so we can understand over the last few months, all the way up to many years, 5 or more years in some cases, how the search demand curve has been shifting. And there's a little bit of predictive element there as well. And when you start to look at that year over year, you can start to predict globally within a given geography how many searches per month are happening for your activity. This interesting chart shows us how searches for vacation or vacation related searches have been trending over the last few years. We see a huge peak typically around the end of Q4, December travel. But if we look at this year, 2022, we see that this line is actually so far trending a little bit below what 2021's was in Q2. And so these high level trends are useful to kind of set the overall context of building a plan. The other cool thing is that we can drill down by type or region, and you can compare different search terms or different topics. So here in this example, I have drilled down to Chicago, and I'm comparing search demand for food tours compared to search demand for architecture tours. And it turns out that recently there's been a slight edge of more search demand for food tours. And so perhaps you could use this intelligence as you think about your offerings for this season or this year as well, as understanding, strictly the types of keywords that consumers are searching. You could start to use this in order to inform how you might shift some of the content of a particular tour, or the fact that maybe we should launch something with a different focus than what we currently have in order to account for that change in demand. So in addition to Google Trends, we can use other tools such as Answer the Public to understand search intent a little bit better. So Answer the Public is a tool that uses scraping of search engines to better understand all of the sorts of long tail phrases and search queries people enter related to a given keyword or topic. And so here, in this example, I entered in Zipline Tours Hawaii into Answer the Public. And it gives you this word cloud type of result, and in which it subdivides by the most common question. So it's almost like a frequency tree. And this too can help you do things like plan out your keyword targeting, plan out content, build an FAQ page that addresses some of the key questions that guests might have, because the better you can anticipate and address the questions and needs of that guest, the more likely that A, you're going to become visible, and B, they're going to book with you as opposed to a competitor. And these are real opportunities for operators to drive more direct bookings because these are kind of the niche content and topics that might not get covered on an OTA website, but that people are actually looking for. So once you've dug into some of those high level trends, you've started to understand how users are searching over time, and you've dug a little bit deeper into the ways in which searches are happening. Now you've got the contours of your map figured out, but we need to start shading in the inside portion. We need to map your competitive landscape. How we're going to do that is we can start simply by Google searching. So Google has a number of different search operators and types of results that they offer. We're going to use several of them to start to build this map. And I would recommend what I do personally when I'm doing this kind of research is I usually start an Evernote file or a Google Doc, and I start noting down, just bullet pointing out in each kind of category here, trend section, and having bullet points, having stats and insights. And then I do the same here in the competitor section. I might create a label or a header for each competitor, and then underneath that, start listing out facts, dropping screenshots into that document as well, so that I'm starting to build kind of a catalog or a file that I can reference later when I go to create an actual plan. So here, let's start by searching the product type or the product category plus destination that you're located in to start to understand who already has visibility in Google today. So in this example, I chose wildlife tours, Yellowstone. And what I noticed in the search result was that the first several results were all paid text ads, which is not uncommon, especially for a tour-specific keyword. So I'd start out and I would note down the domains that I'm seeing. Perhaps I'd try several variants on that search, and then look for the patterns as far as what domain names are showing up again and again in the paid results, as well as the organic results, which I'm showing down below here, this YellowstoneWildTours.com and BrushbuckTours.com. I also like to take note of the different kinds of features I'm noticing. So in this paid result, I'm seeing a call extension, I'm seeing site link extensions. In these organic results, the first one, well, the second one too, they have site link results. This one has an image result as well. It has the first party markup here for that specific tour. And the reason that it's important to take note of that is because these are also opportunities. If Google's already showing these kinds of results for these kinds of searches today, there's a possibility that if you build your plan and optimize your site appropriately, you could hope to capture a similar kind of result for yourself. So the other thing I like to do is once I have noted those different competitor domains, I like to look at the other search results. So not just search, but I like to actually go into images, video, news, and maps. And one important thing to note is that OTAs cannot be listed in Google Maps because they cannot have a Google My Business listing. So this is where it can get interesting, right? You might see, based on each kind of Google result, you might start to understand different opportunities for your brand to gain visibility, or you might get an insight that one of these kinds of results in your specific space is more important than the other. Now, one other thing I'd like to make note of before I continue is that you also have the option back in Google search to do this. You can do a site operator search. So let's say that we knew YellowstoneWildTours.com was a competitor of ours. We could go to Google and type site : YellowstoneWildTours.com. What this does is it is going to return to us all of the pages that Google knows about in their index related to or specifically on that domain, YellowstoneWildTours.com. And that is very helpful because not only are we mapping, who appears in the search results and how they appear and how the result types differ, but we're also going to understand by competitor the specific content they have that is making it into the search results. And that can help you start to build your own plans for adding onto your sitemap, for instance. Now that you've done that Google level research, and by the way, you can do that same thing on Bing as well, and you'll be amazed at how different some of those search result pages may look. But once we have covered that side of things, let's go off of Google, because there's a lot of opportunity too, especially in certain niches or geographies, that the real opportunity, or where a lot of the business is really being done, is off of Google. It's on the OTAs. Or, what are alternative directories, listicles, forums, blog posts like from travel bloggers and so on that have high visibility in search. In other words, I'm looking for, these are the organic links within the top 10 for that keyword phrase we typed in the first step that represent a good opportunity, again, to make your brand more visible. Ultimately, the principle we're going for is maximizing that visibility where it counts, where it really matters. And so if we can stack up several different listings for our brand, maybe a paid text ad, we appear in the maps, we appear organically, we also appear in a couple of these, an OTA, a listicle, and so on, that is going to help us immensely to increase our visibility, traffic, and ultimately our direct bookings. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I wonder if you have run Google Ads in the past. If not, it might be worth opening an account and giving it a try just for some of this intelligence alone. So within Google, there is something known as the Auction Insights report. In this report, it will tell you the other domain names that are competing with you for the same keywords. It will share with you some of the statistics as well, such as the overlap rate, which is how often that competitor domain and yours appear in the same paid search result area. And then they share other competitive metrics, like how often a domain is showing above your own. And you can also get things like impression share. So you can look at this both account wide or by campaign. And I think by campaign is possibly more helpful if you segmented your account properly. And by that, I mean, if you have the ability to understand who is competing with you in paid search for those non-branded search queries like Yellowstone Wildlife Tours, that's really powerful information to have, because one way to look at this is if a competitor is willing to bid on these keywords, they must have some commercial value. So they're important to prioritize and optimize for. Another tool you could use, in addition to Google tools, is you could use a tool called SEMrush or SEMrush. SEMrush, I believe, at the time of this recording, still allows you to have a free account with one project. But in this account, you can do things like competitive research. So you can plug in one of these competitors' domains. You can see their organic keyword rankings, their positions, that is. You can see their paid keywords, some estimates of the amount of traffic that they're receiving, as well as looking at their ad copies. That might be a paid feature. But in general, this is going to give us another lens and more robust data, both organically and paid, and looking at their trend line by country, that can help to inform and map our competitive landscape. So last, what we want to do is turn our data into actual insights. If it's simply a string of facts in a Google document, that's not really useful. We need to actually understand our specific data and then synthesize that into something we can put into action. So I'm going to walk you through the different ways to understand your own data in this step. And in a following video, we will show you how to take that insight and actually turn it into a plan. So let's start by going to Google Search Console. In this report, we can understand our domain's visibility in search today and over time. So there are a number of different ways I recommend filtering and sorting this data to start to pull out the insights. And here are a few of the filters I would recommend. So if you go into Search Console, if you notice in this screenshot, there are a number of different tabs that you can click through that kind of show different results in the table. And you can also apply filters. So the default one is you're looking at search queries. And then you can look at impressions and clicks and your click-through rate by query, which is helpful. But you want to actually look at the pages on your website that are showing up organically. And so here's an example using some of Blend's pages in Search Console. Now, as I go through these rows, one thing you might want to do is, for instance, if you click on a given page URL, it will then isolate that. It will create a filter for that. And then you can actually go back to the queries tab. And now you're looking at a map of what queries did my homepage show up for in Google organic search over the last period of time. You're going to see a table that looks similar to this one. And when you do, I would recommend starting to sort this in different ways. So the best case scenario is this upper right quadrant where you have high impressions and high clicks and hopefully a high click-through rate. Now that is today one of the core keywords, one of the things that it's likely Google thinks your website is most relevant for because you have the most visibility and the most traffic for that. Also, if you start with your homepage, you should expect that your homepage will almost always receive the lion's share of visibility. That can change if you have a larger complex site, but for most tour operators, this tends to be the case. So then you want to do different sorts of these columns to look for other opportunities. For instance, if you have high impressions and low clicks, what might that mean? Well, it might mean that Google thinks your site is relevant for a given keyword search, but users do not. It might mean, however, that with a little bit of optimization on your website, from an SEO perspective, you could actually hope to get a lot more clicks, and you can move that high impression, low click query into the upper right quadrant. You could turn it with a few changes into high impressions, high clicks. And the way you do that is by looking then at how is your website or that given page represented in the search results when someone searches for that query. And what this could mean, or the experiment that I recommend you would run in this case, would be optimizing your meta title and description. But moving on, in the bottom half of this graph, we have low impressions, low clicks. Either this is something that is infrequently searched, or you're very under optimized for that query. So if in the preceding steps, you found that there was actually search volume for that, and you think it is relevant to your business and you want to become visible for it, but it currently lives in the bottom left, you're going to need to launch probably a major intervention to try to get that at least into the top half, much less in the upper right quadrant, and turning it into a higher impression, higher click query for yourself. And finally, on occasion, there are queries that you have relatively lower impressions for, but higher click-through rate or higher number of clicks relative to other queries. And sometimes these are trend or seasonal based searches that can happen. And sometimes there's not much you can do to optimize further for that. But I would say in all cases, you want to take these and sometimes go back to earlier steps, like maybe plugging in some of these into Google Trends again to see, okay, what does that search demand curve look like? Next, you can go into Google My Business, and if you click on the Insights tab, you can understand your map pack visibility and how that changes over time. And you can look at insights like views, engagements, and calls to your business. And again, if this is looking pretty low volume today, I would encourage you to go back to the earlier steps and look into some of the local based keyword research to understand how big this could be for you if you had a better optimized local SEO kind of playbook, including Google My Business. I'm throwing this tool in because I don't feel like many folks are aware of it quite yet. It's a newer tool and it's called Microsoft Clarity. Microsoft Clarity allows you to do things like heat mapping and analytics on your website so that you can actually understand how users interact with your website. This tool, as of right now, is completely free. And I recommend it if you don't have another tool like this, such as Hotjar or Clicky, I believe does this, because you can get important information like how users are interacting with your site. And some of these signals we believe search engines use, like engagement and dwell time, to rank order your site for a given search result. So it's really an interesting perspective to add to a little bit more of that quantitative stuff that we're looking at in other steps. And of course, we can't leave out Google Analytics. So here, one report that I love to surface is looking at the landing pages report, which you can access by going to, in Google Analytics, go to content section, and then go to landing pages. This is in Universal Analytics. In this report, you can also add additional filters or an advanced segment for only organic traffic, for instance. So we can see what are the top organic landing pages over this time frame, and how well are those pages converting. And if you start to kind of map this to what you found in the earlier step of Search Console, we can say, oh, wow, the homepage is visible for these 3 zipline keywords. And in here, we see that this is converting at 5%. But maybe we have, the third page in our landing pages report is the zipline tour page. That one converts at 7%. So it's a higher converting page, but it's not as visible in Search Console. So we need to think through our strategy, and we'll show you how to do that in the next video. Google Ads. Here, what we can do is we want to understand the missed advertising opportunities, especially if you have a high return on ad spend today. The last thing you want to do if you have capacity, and it makes sense for your business, is leave dollars on the table. So you go into your account and you can add columns. So you go to campaigns, columns, modify columns, and you can add columns for lost impression share or lost top impression share due to budget and due to rank. If it's lost due to budget, that means if you increase your daily budget, you're likely to get more visibility, clicks, conversions, and more total revenue. So that is a very low-hanging fruit opportunity to look at. And then again, back to SEMrush, we can understand location-based keyword rankings with a customer's perspective. And by that, I mean, if you set up your free project in SEMrush, you can choose, okay, I want to look at the search results in Nashville specifically. And you can plug in the keywords. You want to see what the search result looks like in Nashville for that keyword. Maybe it's, I don't know, carriage tours in Nashville. So once you run it through the tool in SEMrush, you can actually click on a screenshot kind of the search results page, and it will show you line by line as though you were doing it live in Nashville from, you can choose the device as well, mobile or desktop. Mobile device in Nashville, searching for carriage tours Nashville, show me who's visible for that query, and then tell me how I'm ranking today. And then also tell me what are the different features that are present in that search result page. So this is invaluable if you want to understand truly taking away the personalization and the location features that get in the way and kind of muddy the waters if you search for yourself on your own device. This gives you the real litmus test of how you're doing. So to wrap that up, we looked at high level understanding the context, the trends. We mapped our competitive landscape, and then we also dug into our own data to start to turn that data into insights that we're going to use in the next step. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for part 3, which is turning insight into action.